This is the first webinar that we're giving at Cardstack. So a webinar is like a combination of a presentation, some Q&A based on questions that's submitted in the chat. So if you have questions as I cover certain topics you want me to cover, I would leave some time at the end to address them. And one of the nice things about combining this kind of a real time as well as a thing is that so we can make sure that we can present the ideas about where we believe Web3 or crypto or this field of decentralization is going while being contextual to the question that people have in that particular time. I think we'll continue doing these type of series to cover different topics. Obviously, we at Cardstack work on the infrastructure and usability and the user experience of Web3. And in doing so, there's a lot of building blocks that covers things are sometimes confusing. A lot of the media around crypto and Web3 is very technical, very focused on how to do something. Today, I want to cover a kind of more societal pattern, which is we believe that there's a great migration from the Web2 business model, the Web2 user base to Web3 tools. And we're going to dive down a little bit about what that means. So without further ado, I'm going to go and give a short presentation around how we've organized our work here at Cardstack and how we see in the field, in the marketplace, with our partners and with the technology vendors and the upstream protocol and downstream application that we see, how Web3 is likely going to come together, kind of looking forward 3 to 5 years as we anticipate and expect a great migration of users into this particular network. Okay, so we're talking today about the great migration from Web 2, which is the web as it exists today, to Web 3, which is the interconnected decentralized network that we anticipate would be the primary organizing principles around the world in the internet and beyond. So the agenda today, we're going to cover roughly 3 topics in some degree of depth. One is we're going to talk about the state of Web3. What is Web3? I think the idea, the word, the acronym, the jargon of Web3, what are in there? So we're going to talk about the camps. Like there are different aspects of different people who identify with the word Web3, but in fact has very different definition and different culture coming on. We'll talk about the waves, and this is plural, so different waves of people. What is the first wave of crypto user? What's the second wave of people interested in decentralized finance? And what is the wave that's coming next? And then looking at the current market landscape as postulated by some of the analysts that looking at the logos and the companies that's involved and the projects involved, and then also our version about what we believe this landscape ought to be. There's a lot of meme tweets around Web 2 versus Web 3 as in like how this is very different. We're going to talk about why you would choose the Web 3 version of these tools and how those tools and those categories and those features compare to what is a large business of traditional software and SaaS, hosted software. So we'll do some analysis there. And then that's for people who are new to Web3 but very familiar with tech, software, and platform and cloud, this provides an anchoring and a participation and an understanding of the context of which this Web3 innovation is happening within the greater world of technology and software. And then sprinkle among all of this, we're going to talk a little bit about Cardstack's role, like what we believe is our contribution or our little part that we play within this great migration. So that includes talking about how our composable dApp framework, the application building blocks, how we've added some additional ideas that I believe are important for unlocking usability around the smart contract wallet and the payment protocol, as well as I think concluding on what we believe the future app store or the software catalog will look like. How do we curate the software that will make up Web3 in a way that is not just creating a new type of silos just with crypto as a backing? So can this really be a community-owned open source, open state ecosystem? We believe we can, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So let's jump right into the 3 camps of Web3. So when someone say, I am interested in Web3, I want to work on Web3, the question you should ask them is which Web3? And there's 3 camps. Let's start with that. The first camp is Web3 as crypto markets. So crypto markets essentially is saying that there is ability for you to go and see and trade and do all these kind of things that used to be the main way that people engage with crypto. I bought Bitcoin, I bought Ethereum. And to them, and to some people who are looking at Web3 as a kind of minor rebrand. Oh, so you work in Web3, so that means you trade crypto. That's not entirely untrue. A lot of people look at Web3 and crypto trading as kind of synonyms to each other. So that's one camp. The second camp is the one that is probably most original about the Web3. So Web3 as a word, WEB3, was a API, a set of software component that was included in the Ethereum ecosystem. When the Ethereum ecosystem, Gavin would pick this word Web3 as the API name. So you're going to use the Web3 API to access the Ethereum blockchain. So that's the idea that the Ethereum ecosystem actually introduced the idea, the term of Web3 to the vernacular. And then for those people who are building on Ethereum blockchain or Ethereum-based blockchain on EVM machines, to them, Web3 is the dApp infrastructure, what you build on top of the Solidity or the Ethereum infrastructure, whether it's decentralized finance or DeFi protocol, different type of NFT platform, which is enabled by this programmability that Ethereum brings. For them, Web3 is building on Ethereum. So for this second camp, Web3 is Ethereum. Now, obviously, there's new protocol like Solana and Polkadot, which is Gavin Wood's second project on the same idea. Those also, I think, qualify. As long as a smart contract building this decentralized app or dApp, there's a second camp. And the third camp, and this is where most of the business people discussing the potential Web3 is focusing on, what if we have a Web3 version of current use cases? What we have accounting in Web3? What do we have community incentives in Web3? How do we do payments in Web3? How do we do government in Web3? So to them, there's looking at the use cases and application of software and societal organizing technology in general, and just look at it as like, what is the Web3 version of that? And that's, I think, this is the newest, the most of the conversations outside of the technical field, like, the dApp infrastructure is very engineers and software developers talking to each other, and crypto market is traders and speculators and people excited about the memes of sorts. But the use case and applications where we're getting a crossover to the audience on LinkedIn, or to audience in the C-suites in a business way. I believe that's actually one of the largest untapped market. It's a bit early. I think the use case and application are not entirely there. But this three Web3 camps combined together to form what I call, in previous talks, those that have watched my video on YouTube, I call it the land of the Web3. I am from the land of the Web3. This land of the Web3 has these three constituent territory, state, part, whatever you call it. And that is in conjunction to that, the place where the migration will come. The Web 2 people, the Web 2 technology, the FANG, the Facebook and the Meta and the Google and all those things, all those centralized tech platform, we're going to see users, all right, migrating. And we see sometimes also seeing engineers and staff member, people looking for a new start in a career to say, hey, I'm going to quit my day job working for Web 2 company, like, I don't know, Microsoft or something, and I'm going to work on Web 3. And that's the migration. And that's different waves of that. So what we have seen thus far, right, which is what we see as a initial set of a movement, is that we have two groups of people have already kind of moved from Web 2 to Web 3, not in great numbers, but enough for this to be significant and worth looking into. The first one is obviously the crypto people, right? So the early users, the first person to download a Bitcoin wallet, a person who is install MetaMask to actually trade ETH or trade certain tokens. They are the early users. They're the people who are blazing the trails in participating in this Web3 as in crypto market. At the same time, if you think about the early builders, there's really not much to build if you're just trading Bitcoin. You can build an exchange, you can maybe build a wallet. But most of the real building that is going on right now for the builders are actually going into the dApp infrastructure. I build a decentralized finance protocol, lending protocol, insurance protocol, an NFT marketplace. These are all only possible because of the programmability that Ethereum added to Bitcoin, and Solana and other things have continued that journey. Now, layer 2, layer 1, these kind of efficiency and scalability concern is certainly part of that infrastructure. So we're also seeing builders with experience in building deep technology stack and optimization technology to go and sometimes build on top of the infrastructure of this Web3 as dApp infrastructure, sometimes going underneath and actually inventing new tools and new capability. So that's essentially what has happened. And these are not small numbers. They might be 10 million MetaMask users or a little bit more than that. And so wallet users in the millions, and builders, as far as conferences is concerned, estimates 100,000 developers. That's really, really active, maybe growing faster as a result. But we're not talking about there are 1 billion users on Facebook. These are people who are still on Web 2 because the tools and technology in Web 3 is not mature enough for them to keep up with their families or go around their daily lives. There's still a little bit of an experimentation that you have to go in, which means what we want to do is to see, okay, what kind of infrastructure are there that we can do on this farther reaching but possibly more significant. But before we do that, let's take a look at, when we talk about crypto market, we're talking about tokens, we're talking about NFT, we're talking about staking, we talk about the community and the researching of different things. Now, Cardstack has been in this business of providing tools, and one of the tools that we have is that we have a token. So that's participating within that crypto market as a community engagement mechanism to understand that this is something you're part of, not just because you have an account, it's because this is a slice of that community that you can participate in. And there are different ways of doing it, and so that there might be new NFTs that come on for us, for other people, and there's all part of this very liquid market 24/7. For good or for bad, the market never closes, and that's what people find really exciting. Now, dApp infrastructure, and this is a little bit of an older map, so you can think about this as the 4 layers. There's protocols, such as like Ethereum, Bitcoin. There are infrastructure. These are different types of things you can do, transactions and stuff like that. Use cases, a different early use case, mostly around financial service trading and some social and gaming. Axie Infinity was the famous one. And then the access layer, how you actually get to this information. Now, Cardstack is building some of the tools in there. We're not on this chart, we're on the next one. And we're adding this idea that in the transaction, if you look at buy, sell, borrow, lend, stake, insure, market making, where's payments? Payment is one of the most natural transaction. And so far, it's one of those funny use cases. Like, hey, Bitcoin's good for payment, but nobody actually buys anything with Bitcoin on a day-to-day basis. And with card paying card rewards, the ability to process payment, this is a live protocol on mainnet. We are bringing paying and earning, so paying a merchant and then earning rewards for doing so, not only from the network, but from the merchant, or maybe from a competitor of a merchant. So someone say, hey, I saw you bought this thing from this competitor, furniture shop, here's a coupon, or here's a credit, or here's a token for our DAO, for furniture DAO, that you can get in and you can participate in that. And that's a good way of building things. So we've added that in our ecosystem. We're building a new wallet called Card Wallet that combines the capability of these existing Ethereum wallet, but focus on how do you think about onboarding people without asking them, oh, you need to buy some ETH, you have to buy something, you need to bridge. How do we completely collapse that into something that is similar in complexity and usability as like a centralized app, but still maintain the Connect wallet keys in your wallet type of sensibility? And then we also have other things like Bridge, which allows us to do staking as part of the things. One of the proudest things that we worked on is that we believe that one of the key missing infrastructure, if you look at doing analytic chain analysis, these are all private analysis. So you use public data, what people do on chain, and you sell access to intelligence and business insight to people who pay you $2,000, $10,000 a month. We believe the Tally not only can be an open source version, but the results of these analytics, let's say who's the top users, who's the most engaged, who's the people we should reward, can actually be brought back on chain so the rewards can happen on chain. So Tally is this on chain, off chain integration that we put together. So I guess you can see, I'm sure other organizations will say, hey, we're working on these things, but this chart is growing all the time, to the degree that if you look at the, zooming out, not just beyond infrastructure, looking at the user's application, this is another diagram from including more use cases, not just tools, but also like different types of games and stuff like that. So in this case, since this is a little bit newer, our positioning that Cardstack is a building tool, one of the building block of Cardstack being recognized there. Obviously, we do quite a bit more in this board than there, but at least we know that this type of logo farm or this type of things grows more and more every day. So we expect these kind of infrastructure to continue to get built out. The way you find out about it, whether it's music, in talent management fashion, this will already grow. These are the use cases. And then the user experience, how people actually experience, whether it's 3D through virtual worlds or in things where you can actually get access to physical spaces. These are what we believe as a good starting point to look at what are the use cases and application for Web3. So I think the punchline here is that once we have those use cases and the technology necessary to build them in place, we're going to be able to redesign, rebuild, and replace the Web 2 versions of those use cases in the Web3 stack. And that's essentially the goal here. The goal is not just everybody needs to become a trader or everybody needs to flip NFTs and stuff like that. We're saying, no, everything we do on the internet with software can be redesigned, rebuilt, and replaced with Web3 version of that. And that is a big opportunity. We are talking about every person with a smartphone possibly having a crypto wallet. We're talking about everybody using that crypto wallet instead of a Venmo app or WeChat app to access in a direct way, right, to these set of protocols that are coming together. So this is where the meme of Web 2 versus Web 3 comes into play, where people say, well, Web 2 is about this. I think my tweet was, Web 2, they have access to your data. Web 3, you have access to the data, or your data, right? And some people say Web 2 is like a corporation. Web 3 is like a cooperative, right? So these are all ways of qualities. But can we be more precise about this, right? And so essentially, the burning question is, why would you choose the Web3 tools? Why does it even matter at all? A lot of people in Web3, as once they get into the rabbit hole and they understand what's going on, they keep saying, oh, Web3 is amazing, it's self-sovereign, and it's decentralized, and it's trustless or trusted, depends on how you look at it. And it's like, that's not being precise enough. I know what you're trying to say, but tell me why I need to care about all these technology of smart contracts and wallet. What is actually different about Web3 tools? So I think beyond all the jargon, there's two words I want to talk about. Web3 is really fundamentally about two qualities that we use to judge the application and tools and infrastructure and whatever use case was. Is it ownable? And is it composable? So let's think about this for a second. Why these two things were so important, right? Because one of the first things that happened, right, is that ownable and composable kind of came in two phases. The first phase was Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the original Web3. I don't think those terms existed back then, but it was ownable money. This is money that you hold with a key in your brain, or you write it down on a piece of paper, and that's essentially what it is, right? And the idea here is that once we have this ownable money, you can participate as yourself without going through a bank or intermediate financial intermediary to actually go and move the money for payments and stuff like that. So this is the innovation of Bitcoin, ownable money, right? But Ethereum came along and said, no, we have ownable money called ETH, that's the own version of it, but we also have composable money. And that's when the asset came in, right? So we have this idea of ERC20 tokens. They're an asset that you can create in addition to, you can use it for money like a stable coin with ERC20, but it could be something else. It could be a token representing a slice of something that is not just money. It could be a permission to a club or whatever it might be, included NFT, like non-fungible tokens type of asset. What Ethereum brought to the place is this idea of composability, that the asset that you create, let's say a token for representing a USD stable coin, can be put into a DeFi protocol for earning an interest rate. And that interest-bearing asset C DAI or something like, or Aave DAI or something like that, that is itself an asset that can be deposited into something else. So this idea that a thing that you put in, get back a thing that you can put into something else, get back a thing you can put in something else, such as you put some liquidity into Uniswap, you get back an LP token, you can put that LP token to take a loan and you take that out. That's what you can say the game. And the key here is that it's composable, that the game allows you to play in an iterative basis, because the technology is like not only a Lego ball, it's like a Russian nesting doll, where you can just keep building out from it and creating more and more interesting structure. Now, we end here. If we're just talking about money and assets, people say, well, this is not really relevant to me. Some people who are finance bro or crypto degens will be talking about money and assets all day long, but money and assets is a means to living for most people and not really the reason for living for them. But as we go beyond this idea of ownable, which I think Bitcoin invented or introduced, and composable, which is what Ethereum brought into place, we can then ask ourselves a question: what other things in the world can be ownable and composable that can make up the Web3? And obviously, the next thing is ownable and composable data, right? Which is you have some data about yourself or about something you put out there, an artwork, an NFT. You want that to be ownable. The person who owns it actually have access to it permanently, not hosting on your server that you can rip from them, or data about what you've done. These things are possible, and you see some protocol like IPFS from the Protocol Labs and the Filecoin people, and they're trying to put data into this storage network, and that allows it to be composable in the protocol level. And when that happens, you can then say, okay, this is my profile. Here's who I am. There's some data, but it's really my identity. It's my Twitter profile. It's my Ethereum name service ENS profile tied to an image, something that I can say, this is uniquely me. I prove that I own this wallet. I prove that I have these assets in my wallet, and therefore I am who I am. And then the asset could be, I own this Bored Ape, and therefore my identity is defined by it. But it could also be that I went to this school, or I completed this program, or participated in this thing, or I was the co-creator of this amazing new thing. So this idea of identity, right, is built on top of these Lego blocks, and it's part of the Web3 ecosystem. And this is where the recent proliferation of DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organizations, is about access, right? Because I have this token or this asset, because I can prove that I am the person on this Discord account, I now have access to the Discord community. So it's token gated access. So that's also part of the Web3 vernacular. And then because you have this access, and because you have this data, because you've done this something, you now may be able to be eligible for an airdrop, for early access to a certain type of new products. So at the end of the day, when you're saying I'm giving access, what you're really giving access to is software, right? I get access to software to this thing. So what if software itself is ownable and composable? Now, for those that have been using computers longer than the TikTok era, you know that there used to be a time you can buy a piece of software, install on your computer, and you can run it in 3 years without having an active subscription. So we've moved to the world, in the SaaS world, in the Web2 world, at least most recently, where everything's rented. Right? You know, you have access to software only because you're paying this monthly fee. But software itself can be ownable, especially if you ask developer, hey, do you have access to software that you used to build your code and build your project? And say, yeah, it's open source. It's on my computer. It can never be taken away from me. The software I make, the software I use are all locally on my computer. So is it possible to extend the principles to do software? And this is our main emphasis is, now that we passed this money access, data, assets, and identity, these are the things we're working on: software, the rights to use the software because you're part of the community, because you were co-creator, the ability for you to use the history of what you've done. Oh, I bought this thing and therefore I can use this thing. Or I did this thing, therefore I can kind of own my history. I cannot be erased. If I want to erase it, I can do it, but other people can look at, hey, look at everybody has used this software. We're doing a beta airdrop. So these are all the people who have done this stuff on our protocol, beta test our wallet, help us improve quality. Based on that history that you own, you now get an asset that you own, right? So this is the composability and ownability building on top of that. Now we are seeing new things about social network. What if you own the relationship, your followers, the people who subscribe to your YouTube channel? You don't own that if it's on YouTube. But if it's on crypto and people have an on-chain record, you can bring that relationship that you have established in one community and say, hey, all the people who bought my artwork on this platform that I minted through OpenSea now can follow me here because I know your assets and your account and your address. And then finally, and this is different, monetization is different than money, the ability to earn from these kind of participation, these mostly done on chain, so the records are being written in this public ledger, and based on that, you can may say, oh, I'm monetizing. Based on my participation, I'm actually earning something, whether it's revenue, rewards, airdrop, or a consideration of other sorts. Okay, so to me, Web3 is ownable, composable, money, asset, data, identity, access, software, rights, history, relationship, and more. Right? So when people say, I want to work on Web3, you ask them which one of them are working on, not only a use case, but it's going to be probably these aspects that's underlying what's going on. So then you look at it and flip side and look at the question and say, what are the Web3 tools, Web2 tools that exist today, using a chat system like Slack, Salesforce, using Stripe for payment, Shopify for store, Square for point of sale. These are they ownable? Now, can you actually own a Shopify store, or do you really rent it? Is it really composable? I guess you can use some fancy API automation service to automatically add something to your Salesforce database as someone buys a thing from your Shopify. But they are all basically either composable, but you're completely at the mercy of the software provider, or ownable only in the case that before your account gets canceled. So to me, what is going on with all those S's, the Salesforce, the Stripe, is Web 2. And this great migration requires that we redesign, rebuild, and replace it with Web 3 variants of these tools. We're not going to see Salesforce open up the database and say, hey, all the records are now owned by your keys, and you can take your data that you're putting in a competitor. That's crazy. But in DeFi, in Ethereum space, that happens. You take liquidity, you gain in one protocol and bring in another protocol. It's called yield farming. That's what people do. But that kind of mobility may not be the best for every individual protocol, but it's fantastic for the user and for the ecosystem along. But to do that, there needs to be a lot more application, user experience, a user interface that's going to be built, right? And that's essentially what we're working on. We're taking the learnings that we have and our expertise in dApp infrastructure in different aspects of it, as I've shown you in the logo, and putting all together in something called the Cardstack framework, which allows you to take a really complex application, breaking into cards in pages and collections and tabs, so that you can build those things back up. So if you need a feature to swap something from something before you can take a next action, so it's like, oh, someone wants to get paid in this thing, but I don't have it. Right now, you actually have to use the Web3 infrastructure in MetaMask and do each step by step, convert it, log into it, connect this to thing. But we want to have the framework where you can say, pay this person this money. Take some asset I have, convert it and bridge it or whatever it might be. Just do that all automated for me. And that entire user experience is built onto the top of this Lego block called cards. And the Cardstack framework brings together so that, in fact, under this Cardstack framework, the use case application is not 100 logos that requires 100 login or 100 wallet connect, but it's one application that you log into that contains the parts and modules of different applications composed together in a consistent way. And that's what we're doing, composing the dApp infrastructure into a uniform, cohesive user experience for the user. Well, how would you do that? That means that you have to go ahead, remember that logo farm? You have to build every single one of this application. Can one company, one project, one organization, or even one community do it? And the idea is, it's kind of not possible if it is just a single corporation, right, to do this. Facebook only have like 6 apps that people use, and there's a billion or a million apps on App Store. What if we build the App Store for Web3? What do we give the incentive using the liquidity and the excitement, energy, and capital in the Web3 market and say, hey, do you want to replace this part, like the Salesforce part of the Web2? And if you do this, then you can form a DAO or collaborative or cooperative, whatever the structure might be. And there are a lot of people working on organization and monetization, financial tool and shared wallets and stuff like that. And then you can submit this application, build on a Cardstack framework to this Web3 catalog. So you've added your slice. And you will have a claim. It's like you're a part of this club. You're part of the original creation team. You may have a token. You may have an NFT. And these are all things that are possible once you have this ability to bring this application into this catalog. And that catalog is part of something that people can find, people can look for, and people can put together. And when enough people do this, and then we're going to get started with the tools we believe that everybody needs. But as we go to the more niche stuff, like, medical information, well, I'm not an expert in that. My team is not an expert, but there are many expert teams. If that they look at this migration from Web 2 to Web 3, say, hey, I can build a Web 3 version of that on top of this dApp infrastructure funded by the crypto market, and now I have a claim and a right to sell it, to monetize it, and get a split on the revenue from this larger thing we call the card catalog. And that's the two things that is probably the top in our work in Cardstack, is a team focusing on building the developer tool necessary to build a really performant composable framework, which is a hard problem, not just in crypto and blockchain. It's a hard problem. It's how do you make Salesforce and Slack composable? It's a big question, right? Salesforce bought Slack as a company, and how do you integrate them? It's not easy to think about how to integrate chat with a customer relationship management database problem. So we have figured it out. You have something called a voxel design system that breaks it down to its constituent part and then bring it back together like a true Lego brick. Doing similar things to what Vitalik has been able to do on the ledger stuff, on the smart contract, but as the web application framework, not just on the money and asset part. So, in summary, Cardstack, we participate in the crypto market because we have a token, because we're building wallets and stuff like that. We integrate the web dApp infrastructure. We know that we're not going to invent every protocol. We believe payment is missing, so we brought that in. But if you're using swaps and you need to convert one type and bridge another, there are many, many good protocols that we want to provide an interface and integrate those infrastructure as part of the Cardstack experience. And then we want to curate the use cases and application to start. And then, just like, hey, what are the use case and application? And then moving forward to say, hey, now that we know what the use cases are, why don't we find a way to crowdfund it, to use the crypto market to actually provide opportunity for developers and designers and product people to come and build these composable Lego blocks instead of trying to all raise VC and build a low vertical slice and repeat the kind of logo fragmentation that we get in the past. So one way to look at it, is that we're looking at the crypto market of Web3 as kind of the past. Like Web3 is, anchored and based on crypto, but it's really moved beyond that. The present of Web3 is really about the dApp infrastructure. The future is about the use cases. So, but from a market point of view, the crypto market. It's a big market. There are a lot of organizations like Binance, Coinbase, FTX that has built tremendously competitive service organization on top of the crypto market that makes it a good competitor alternative to the traditional market. And I'm sure they're going to expand into things that look more traditional all the time. But if you think about the number of people that crypto market is their primary goal, is a sliver. When we talk about dApp infrastructure and especially usage of that, NFT marketplace being a good example of it's just easier to understand that than derivatives, right? And that's more people that will be part of that thing. So that's going to be allowing us to get a little bit further along in the adoption curve. But it's the use case and application that is going to be the future great migration for Web 2 to Web 3 is around those use case and application. And for us, it's you got to be ready for the crypto market. You have to set on infrastructure and you go get that stuff. So what's exciting in crypto is that participation and sometimes the financial upsides on that. What's necessary in dApp is you have to fill in the infrastructure. This is not a complete software stack. You can't build everything that Facebook, Microsoft, Google is building yet. For example, you can't use data analytics and AI and machine learning in a way with our Tally protocol. We're trying to tap that in. So there's still missing technology infrastructure. We're set to fill in what's there. And then go create what's useful on top of those foundation. In a more concrete terms, on the work that we are doing, what's going on in the crypto market is that we believe that the incentive structure of crypto is really powerful, but it's the tools are somewhat kludgy. So a couple examples is that there is this idea of airdrops. So if you have used a Uniswap protocol, which is a kind of trading protocol, you would have gotten an airdrop hopefully for 200 uni, which is not nothing, as they say. But it's one time. It's something that happens only one time. So we're building a protocol called Card Reward that allows you to set up these programs, these rules that can run over time. So it's kind of like staking, but it's really a type of using that ongoing activity history, the ownable and composable history, to create this new opportunity, not only for us to airdrop tokens or NFT from the Cardstack ecosystem, but it's a software tool for other organizations exploring Web3 to use this as a primary distribution mechanism for these kind of recurring airdrop, or recurring Merkle drop will be the technical language. So that's what we are contributing in there. On what we feel is missing, obviously we talked about payments being missing. It's a really important thing to be able to have this kind of virtual currency being used, and then that requires us to make things a little bit easy to understand. Stable coins and swapping should just be like, pay this person, tap a button, Face ID should just be done, should be like Apple Pay. So we're doing that. And to do that, you need to do the protocol to automate and compress the step, but you also have to do a daily driver wallet, a wallet that is on iOS and Android that allows you to go ahead and have an experience that's tailored to the type of use cases that we see. So we have that on the App Store and the Play Store now, and it will be building a new version of it that it makes it truly a smart contract wallet, so you can actually give portions of your key to your friends and family and have you recover it without having to do that. So this smart contract idea that this account on chain has this type of capability restriction. You can give someone a sub account that can then spend only up to $1,000. Those are features you would expect to see in the Web2 if you're doing a corporate credit card or something like that program for businesses. So Card Wallet using the Gnosis Safe smart contract wallet, which has now been deployed to mainnet and many other layer 2 chain, including their chain, Gnosis chain, which is we used to be called XDAI chain, and that's the chain we're birthed in. So we're going to continue iterating on the Card Wallet to provide the thing that when you scan, that is your identity, that's your passport to access all of Web3, the ownable, composable version. But what's useful? What is the application framework? This is the really, if you ask us, our team, what they're working on the most, it's not just the crypto stuff and the blockchain stuff, it's ability to think about decentralized hosting. The cost-based hosting infrastructure. We are launching, we actually, I believe, launched the profile page for payments called card.xyz. So you can get a name like, atlas.card.xyz, and that becomes your link tree that can become a place that people can find you on the web. And on that is the instruction of how you get paid, how to join your thing, how to buy your thing. So we're going to build this kind of profile system around this cost-based system. Obviously, what goes in a profile, what goes into the dashboard that is, behind the scenes is the software catalog we talked about. And to do that, we need that Card SDK, the composable framework Web3 UI. The funny thing is that this may be the most futuristic thing, but it's the first thing we worked on. How do you make application composable, transcend Web3 and Web2? Is really about computer science. What is modularity? How do you make things that composable efficient? How do you make efficient thing easy to use? And these are the things that we've iterated many times. And I believe that the work that we're doing on Card Compiler around the Card SDK version 3 now, it's going to allow us to kind of summarize and condense and give access to all the things that you've seen, not only in what we're doing, but also as we sit on top of the infrastructure and the crypto market as large. For those that's been with us for a while, you know that this is the way we think about our product roadmap. So I won't go into detail on this, but we released a roadmap at the beginning of the year about what we're doing in each of the areas that we're doing around Card Space, wallet, and stuff like that. We are completing the quarter, and all of these things are on track, and we're going to ship them by the end of the year, and end of the quarter. And then the things that get prioritized and planned, evaluating, we'll adjust. But generally, our team is quite aligned that these are the things we need to do. What's unique about what we do is that everything you see that we're doing here is open source. So if you're a developer, you can go to our GitHub, github.com/cardstack/Cardstack, and keep track of all the work that we're doing. But what if you're not a developer? How do you participate? And this is where I want to kind of announce that we are working on something called the Web3 Co-op, focusing on the use case of curating the applications that are potential for Web3. So Web3 Co-op is capture and define the concept and tools required for Web3. So some of them come from Web2, right? For example, we have a category of enterprise resource planning. For those that's in the IT field, know that's the accounting system for big companies. Within that category is payroll, accounting. Well, if you're doing Web3 and you're building a DAO, you're building a community, you're going to have to pay people. That's payroll. You're going to have to know how to integrate with tax system. That's financial reports to report to your community. So it turns out a lot of Web2 concepts like payroll, legal structure, financial report. Do you want to form a YMO LLC for your particular DAO? These are all relevant. So we saw this overlapping that the Web2 use cases, if we want to redesign, rebuild, and redeploy those things, we need to know what they are. What is the actual concepts involved in this? So The idea here is that these things like enterprise resource planning is there, but there are also other things that are more specific to blockchain, such as non-fungible tokens and NFTs and auctions and NFT mining. These are specific, but the category or NFT is actually additional to the category of software like development lifecycle and stuff like that. And as you go through this list, we've kind of came up with the initial list. This is in no way exhaustive. It's like a particular a plan that we got started on. These are all the concepts we would define and help people figure out like these are the concepts and what are the elements, maybe even breaking down further who are the companies working on each of those things, who are the projects, who have a lead on them. And to curate it, to maintain this so that this list remains complete, we're going to need to be collaborative about it. And so what we're launching is this Web3 co-op system, so you can submit your what you learn and what you research so we can curate this catalog. Our goal is to actually move this catalog, which is going to be a content and repository of sorts, to the Cardstack framework as part of our first application of our collaborative OS for Web3. So every single thing that you contribute is actually ownable and composable, and you have to connect using Card Wallet, and your contribution, your submission is actually key to your account, and you're submitting it. And when you get approved, you actually get an asset and receipt that, hey, here's a proof that you submitted a new category and you were the mother or father of that category. And then you can get bragging rights when you go to a crypto conference or regular conference in the future if this becomes something. So we want to build together, earn together, work together, play together to be able to use this framework that we built to build this operating system, the idea that you have the single dashboard into what is going on. And that's what we are building at Cardstack. And now, of course, in future webinar and talks, I'll go in a little more detail about what we're working on. But that's kind of what I want to cover today around the great migration of Web3. And I think I have some questions that has been submitted, so I want to see if I can address some of them. So one of the question was, what do you think is the biggest factor in the migration of Web3 Web3? What area do you see as the highest project to support in the next 12 months? We really believe that discovery is the biggest problem. To be able to find people, have people find that Web3 is something that's relevant to their lives. That's one of the reasons we're focusing on the card.xyz project, which is the domain name that will be hosting the card space software. .xyz has somehow, I don't know why, became one of the signal that something is Web3. If you have a accounting system, you call it accounting.xyz, and people say, oh, a Web3 version of it. So we have card.xyz, something that we possess, and that allows you to create a profile page. And you can then put the profile page on all the places on Web2. As your LinkedIn profile, your Instagram profile link, your things. And that we will provide all the features so you can link to your YouTube or whatever it might be, your company or your projects. But in addition to that, real estate that replaces a feature of a link tree or profile aggregator, we will have a lot of crypto features. So you can be the place where you can connect to your wallet for your followers and users and your friends and families and actually do those composable, ownable relationship thing there. But the important thing is to have a beachhead, to have a place that people visit, to have that real estate, digital real estate being distributed into Web2. You know, if you're going to get people to migrate to your new city or your new suburb, a new development in outside of town, you're going to give signs and signages and ads in the city center and where the people are. And the signage here is not about buying ads on Facebook. It's about getting people, individuals, to say, hey, I'm on the Web3 now. I'm alice.card.xyz. And that's really where we draw. So I believe that's the beginning of the kind of adoption to be able to do. Now, obviously, to build card.xyz and to show what we can do, we all need all the catalog and SDK stuff so that the features go beyond just a link aggregator and maybe a payment QR code scanner, which is what we're shipping in the next few weeks, but it will actually become a portal to interact with that person, not connecting to a dApp, but connecting to that person or that identity or that wallet or that pseudonym or that avatar and then interacting with them. So it's a really new way of thinking about learning about social networks and what they have succeeded and applying it to a kind of distribution model. How do you actually distribute? And obviously blogging tools and decentralized podcasting will be one thing that will be included in Cardspace, and that will also drive the adoption. The second question is, how long would it take for a Web2 company like Uber to fully transition to Web3 or use our tool? I don't know. It's like, how long does it take for a Web 2 or Web 1 or Web 0 company like JP Morgan to fully transition to Web 3? I'm hopeful. I think there are people really excited about within that works for these big companies, whether it's Uber or Facebook, whatever it might be. Look at Metaverse. Before I started Cardstack, I used to run corporate innovation at a big company. So I know the work of people that are good people that in these large organizations are advocating, sometimes to deaf ears, sometimes to increasing excitement to push for this thing. But it's really hard to change the nature of this company who owns the customer relationship, brings, you want to retain the customer, a lot of language of control, and say, it's open, you can leave, it's your data, right? So how much are they going to philosophically align with it? So I believe they will experiment, they will try, and all adoption and all experimentation is positive for the field. I don't think they will fully transition on it. We're certainly, as Cardstack, willing to partner and want to, and we see extremely forward-looking company, and you can see Visa as a good example in a conversation with them, that they're looking at crypto as a growth area for that. Of course, we would like to work with them and find a way to integrate what they can do on being able to pay. So our goal is to be able to use a prepaid card that you have created in a card wallet and actually use it to buy a soda if you have a card that is printed in your wallet in a more traditional chip and pin sense, right? So those are the things we're working on. But I don't believe that's the majority of the energy, but it will be, I do expect experimentation and some limited success to happen here. The next question is, how important do you think community is for Web3? I believe community is really important. The question is who? Right. So right now, when we talk about Web3 communities, remember the three camps of Web3. We talk about the crypto market, the dApp builders, and they have very strong community. If you've ever gone to a Ethereum like hackathon event like East Denver or something like that, the community of builders, the people who want to write code and share knowledge about how to write contracts, is strong. But the community of users are weak. Like, there are not many people sharing ideas how to use these to do their daily lives. They're sharing information about how to use WordPress, how to use no-code tools, how to use Airtable, how to use Notion to organize their lives and their business and build more greater efficiency in what they do personally and in their work life. That hasn't happened yet. But I think that community, or the community of users, is going to be really important. Now, obviously, traders, builders, and users are a part of one broader Web3 community because you have the same goal. You're citizen of the same land of the Web3. But I believe the community is really important. And I think we have a lot to learn from communities that have gotten marketers involved. Like HubSpot as a company has a real a big community around product marketing and that type of like content marketing type of exercise. So community is important, but it's not just crypto community. It's learning about community building techniques in Web2 and Web3 and kind of putting them together. Next question is, what do you believe is the biggest threat to the development of Web3 in the moment and how you tackle these? And in the second follow-up is, can you elaborate a bit on how Cardstack development framework may be censorship resistant? Is it because it's built on top of EVM? Well, that's three questions. I'll talk about the biggest threat to the development of Web3. I think the biggest threat of the development of Web3 is that the protocol has ran far, far, far ahead of the wallet. So the more you use different protocol and bridge to different networks and try different smart contracts on different languages, the more complicated the journey of the user is. Using MetaMask is hard enough. For some people, using Coinbase is more difficult enough. For us to add all this complexity, to know exactly which bridge is the canonical one that you're not going to get your funds stolen. You use Avalanche, you know it's Trader Joe, but what if you don't? What if it's Trader Bob? Would you lose all your money? I don't know. So there's a real kind of curation and a wallet problem that exists there. So I think that's the biggest risk. And now obviously we're trying to solve that by spending our time thinking about the protocol and the synthesis from a single app, on a single phone experience to make sure that curated experience. The second question is actually a good one. Can Cardstack be censorship resistant? So this is a tricky thing. So the development framework is censorship resistant because it's naturally a open source framework. Like I use React. I use Ember, I use Node.js, I use Python, I use Django, I use Ruby on Rails. Those open source framework, which is Cardstack, is also an MIT licensed open source framework. That's obviously anybody can use it, and you can even share the code if you make your application build on top of Cardstack open source. Anybody can run it. So it's kind of like the open source and free software type of work, where if the software itself is open source, then it's censorship resistant because users can run them. Practically, users are not going to run their own software. Like, people don't even run their own WordPress, and it's not that hard to run your own WordPress. Software as a service is really convenient to use it. So I think the one thing about it is that the Cardstack framework itself, we want to have a network of service providers. So network service provider providing kind of like hosting, decentralized hosting. So like one click, I will run your Cardstack for you. But most importantly, they are not unique, right? So if you say they shut down your account, let's say you're in the wrong country with the wrong jurisdiction, then you still own your data, because a lot of data is either on your computer, you can download it, it's synced to your local devices on your phone, and you can reboot another Cardstack instance with what you've saved. Almost like how magically you can back up a phone and get a new phone and all your thing comes out and show up the same way. It's a new phone, it's a new environment, the same thing. The host should not control your access to all your data. So the censorship resistance comes from the fact that you own your data in your software. So you can port that software to a new host, even though you're doing a hosted version of that. So that's how we believe the Cardstack framework will actually happen. And the question becomes, is it because it's built on top of EVM? I do believe that having some of your data on chain allows you to reboot your identity somewhere else. But I do believe one of the missing thing is not every piece of data can be on chain. So I believe Filecoin being able to store your data in an encrypted way, maybe use the key on your wallet to decrypt some data and then port it to another place or another network or share with another person is a really important thing. So EVM is a foundation, but not the only thing. What are the best ways a Web3 enthusiast can help Cardstack to do the migration? I think we have to speak in the language of the people as they live their lives today. So if you go to every single person and say, have fun staying poor, or like if you don't do an NFT, you're like missing out on the cultural revolution, then you're just not speaking the language. The language in NFT DAOs and DeFis and token gating and stuff like that, it's not what people use on a day-to-day basis. So it's really important for us to use the language, it's like building a website or building a customer system or a customer experience, like or e-commerce, a storefront. These are the language that people in tech. And again, we can't convince someone who writes the mail in paper and mail it using a postage stamp. But for people who are digitally literate and work within that kind of Web2 theme, we have to reach out to them and speak to them about the Web3 version of what they're doing every day and what they're valuable, if they're a marketer and stuff like that. So I think a lot of our activity about Web3 co-op is about really orienting the material towards people who knows technology and then introducing them to the composability and that kind of standardization that comes with the Web3 thing. So the way that you can help is to participate in Web3 co-op and help us curate and what the logos are and engage in the process of standardizing. Okay, so what is the standard of a Web3 invoice? Can we come to that? It's the same way standardizing of the assets of ERC20 as a token has been really helpful. What if we do that standardization on top of the Cardstack framework using our schema system, which is a way of describing data structure, columns in Excel or forms in a form? We have that. So that may be one way to go, not just talk about the technology building block, but actually talking about the shape of the user experience and the data and the way we do data entry and how to curate the assets and the relationships. That's really what Cardstack is doing, and the Web3 co-op is one way for us to work together and put that information out there. How do you plan to add a reputation score to Cardstack? Are you building rehouse reputation protocol? I think a reputation protocol is a specific algorithm. So it talk about particular judgment. We believe that anybody who has bought a lot of things is worth a lot. Or we believe someone who is contributing many times is worth more to the community. Or we believe someone who has said nothing for a year but post one thing that was like, wow, this is the most insightful is worth. What is the reputation system that would be able to judge whether the first or second or third thing is the most valuable? So I don't believe in the reputation system as an algorithm that we all agree on. I believe that we should provide an analytic platform so that different developers, different data scientists, different mathematician can come up with different algorithms and deploy them to Cardtally, which is our kind of analytic runtime using Python as the underlying code. So they write Python code using PyData, do machine learnings and analysis in SQL, whatever it might be, and they have these reputation systems submitted to this network. And then you can look at it. It's like, well, there's 4 different scores. Some come from this research group in Copenhagen. This is coming from a commercial company. This my friend wrote for me to find my best customer in my business. And you can use those in your application, in your Cardstack application. It's like, oh, I trust this. I want my news feed to filter to only people who are top 100 in this algorithm. So we call it algorithmic diversity. We want people to submit different type of algorithm for reputation, for risk scoring, for credit rating, and all of those things are very much just a platform. The same way Ethereum say, what is the asset we want to support in Ethereum? Well, we want to support a platform for asset creation. The same thing with Cardstack. Similar to Ethereum, we want to support a platform for algorithm through a Cardtally work. So actually curate, and you can choose. If you say this algorithm, this reputation is not good for my community, which emphasize few and better things instead of many crappy things like spam, then you can switch your algorithm, and that's how reputation is going to be done. And all will be based on on-chain activity. So that on-chain activity will be identical for all the algorithms. They're drawing upon the same truth about what people have done, when they've done it, with what and with whom. But the results of what you will rank and what you will suggest, what you recommend, what you will gate will be different, depends on which algorithm you choose. What will prevent big companies from copying Cardstack? Big company don't copy. If you think about how big companies works, it's a lot of really smart people overcompensated and underemployed. So they go in there and they have no opportunity to do anything because so many smart people, so much fiefdom. I've been there before in my previous corporate life, and you're just fighting for relevance within this big company. It's very hard to say, hey, we should just drop everything and copy. Now, if your founder's still in charge, like Microsoft, Bill Gates in the internet era, he was able to say, hey, the internet is a big thing. Let's mobilize the entire company to switch that focus. We don't see these founders in control. If you look at all the FAANG companies, they're all caretakers, people who are very competent, great CEO like Satya and whatever it might be. And they are going to push for certain things that make sense, but they're not going to pivot to Web3. In the same way. So I don't expect there to be the will or the process to do it. Could they fork out code and run it? Yes. Does Amazon do that all the time? They take open source code and fork and run it. That's fine. So I believe that the open source code base is not the only thing that matters. And that's why we have to build this kind of on-chain state structure of curation, because that's a database that is going beyond just software. So if there's anything to take away for this ownable and composable thing that we talked about today, is that the network that comes out of this is the value. Right? It's not just the individual pieces of data, assets, relationship, and access, right? It's the network of how those tapestries are interconnected. And that interconnectors, much like a city you move to, it's not just about the store, the restaurant, the drugstore, and the clubs, and the roads, and the park. It's the inter-network of the people, the places, the territorial culture of those things. And that is very hard to replicate. No matter what kind of companies was like, I'm going to build an entire new city because we have infinite money in the middle of nowhere, and it's a dead town, it's ghost town. China has a couple of them, right? Where money alone is not enough and power alone is not enough. And that community, that interconnected tapestry of cityscape, of this Web3 land of the Web3 scape, is really what we need to work on. And the way to do that is to build the tool so that it's easy to use, enjoyable, and has a standard, and has a little bit of a serendipity in the composition. As you say, oh, this building next to that thing creates something else. So composability, which is what we're working on most of all at Cardstack, is the foundation of Web3. On that adoption curve, we are indebted to all the protocols and all the markets that came before that. But I believe the unlocking of the great migration of Web3 is the work that Cardstack is going to do. And we hope that by doing so, the wave of the users that actually fulfill their needs and their purposes on a day-to-day basis becomes what people talk about in Web3 in a couple of years. So thank you very much for your attention today. I hope this was a helpful session, and we will curate and put more of this information out there. And until next time, thank you so much for your time.